What happens when private rage becomes public evidence? And at what point does celebrity drama stop being entertainment and start becoming genuinely dangerous? January 2026 marked one of those moments, the kind that freezes time for a culture and forces people to look deeper than headlines. A leaked FaceTime recording, released by social media figure Selena Powell, sent shockwaves through hip-hop, professional sports, and pop culture alike. In the clip, rapper Offset is heard making explicit, violent threats toward NFL star Stefon Diggs, Cardi B's current partner and the father of her youngest child. These weren't vague insults or exaggerated bravado meant for lyrics or social media clout. The words were specific, graphic, and chillingly personal. Within hours, millions had heard it. And once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. So how did we get here? The audio, first shared online and rapidly reposted across every major platform, captured Offset, born Kiari Cephas, threatening to beat, strip, and shoot Diggs in the knee. That final detail landed like a gut punch. For a professional athlete whose livelihood depends on his body, especially his legs, this wasn't just trash talk. It was a threat aimed directly at someone's future. Ask yourself this. When threats target someone's livelihood, does intent even matter anymore? Selena Powell claimed she released the recording out of fear. She alleged that Offset had repeatedly threatened her over a $15,000 dispute and said she felt trapped in silence. In her own words, she stated publicly that if anything happened to her, Offset should be held responsible. Powell's past controversies led some to question her motives, but the recording itself became impossible to ignore. Voices can be disputed. Context can be debated. But evidence like this, raw, unfiltered, and time-stamped, carries its own weight. And the internet reacted instantly. Millions of views. Trending hashtags worldwide. Comment sections filled not with jokes, but with concern. This wasn't treated like rap beef or celebrity drama. It felt different. People sensed it. This was real anger spilling into real danger. But moments like this don't appear out of nowhere. To understand why Cardi B was visibly shaken in the days that followed, you have to look backward, past the fame, past the headlines, past the memes. Her relationship with Offset began in 2017. It was fast, passionate, and intensely public. They fell in love in front of the world, married quietly, and welcomed 3 children. From the outside, it looked like a fairy tale with a hip-hop soundtrack. But behind the scenes, cracks formed early. Infidelity, some of it painfully public, became a recurring wound. Apologies followed. Then reconciliations. Then promises of change. And each time, hope briefly returned, before collapsing again. Love turned into cycles. Trust turned into negotiations. By 2024, Cardi filed for divorce again, this time saying she was done for good. Not for attention. Not for leverage. But for survival. What followed, according to her own statements, wasn't peace. It was pressure. On live streams watched by millions, Cardi broke down. Not the polished superstar version, just a woman, exhausted and overwhelmed. She said she felt harassed. She said she felt emotionally cornered. She said she felt unsafe trying to move on with her life. Here's the question many viewers are now asking. If someone tells you, repeatedly, that they feel endangered, how long do we ignore it because they're famous? When Cardi moved forward with Stefon Diggs, tensions escalated quickly. Offset mocked Diggs publicly. He shaded Cardi online. Fans noticed cryptic posts, sudden mood shifts, and increasingly aggressive language. Then came leaked messages, allegedly showing Offset asking about Diggs' whereabouts. Each incident alone could be dismissed as immaturity. Together, they began to form something else entirely. A pattern. And patterns are what courts pay attention to. Stefon Diggs, notably, stayed quiet. No public clapbacks. No threats. No interviews chasing headlines. He kept his distance, focused on his career, posted motivational quotes, and let the noise pass without feeding it. In moments like this, silence isn't weakness, it's discipline. Offset's silence after the leak, however, felt different. It wasn't strategic. It was heavy. The kind of silence that lets consequences speak for you. Legal analysts were quick to weigh in. They suggested the recording could significantly strengthen Cardi B's case for custody protections and restraining orders. Threats, even verbal ones, carry serious consequences under harassment and terroristic threat statutes. And for an artist already familiar with the justice system, this wasn't just a PR problem. It was a crossroads. So what does this mean long-term? For Offset, the shift is stark. Past scandals painted him as reckless in love. This reframes him as volatile. And that distinction matters, to fans who grew up listening to him, to brands that invest millions in his image, and to courts that care less about talent and more about behavior. For Cardi B, the narrative has changed just as dramatically. Her emotional reactions, once mocked or dismissed as too much, now appear consistent with someone enduring prolonged psychological pressure. Public sentiment has largely swung in her favor, not because she's perfect, but because she's human. And that may be the most important part of this story. Strip away the fame, the money, the platforms, and the followers. What remains is something painfully familiar, a woman trying to protect her peace, her children, and her future. A man unable, or unwilling, to let go. And a culture finally being forced to ask whether we excuse dangerous behavior simply because it comes from someone we admire. This moment isn't just about Offset or Cardi B or Stefon Diggs. It's about accountability. About recognizing when lines are crossed. About understanding that words, especially violent ones, carry weight, consequences, and scars long after they're spoken. And maybe, just maybe, it's about growth. Because inspiration doesn't always come from triumph. Sometimes it comes from watching someone stand their ground, choose safety over chaos, and refuse to normalize fear. Sometimes it comes from realizing that even the most powerful voices deserve protection when they say, "I'm not okay." January 2026 will be remembered not just for a leaked recording, but for the uncomfortable questions it forced everyone to confront. Long after the audio stopped circulating, long after the hashtags faded, what lingered was a feeling many people couldn't quite shake, that something deeper had been exposed. Not a secret, but a pattern. Not a moment of outrage, but a mirror. Because moments like this don't arrive out of nowhere. They build quietly, over years, through unchecked ego, constant applause, and the dangerous illusion that status shields behavior from consequence. When the recording surfaced, it wasn't just shocking because of what was said, but because of how familiar it sounded. Anger, resentment, control. Words spoken as if no one else mattered. As if no one else would ever hear. And yet, the world did hear. For Selena Powell, the fallout has been complicated. To some, she is a whistleblower who pulled back the curtain. To others, an opportunist who pressed record at exactly the right moment. The truth, as usual, lives somewhere in the gray. But even her loudest critics concede one thing. Without that recording, this conversation would not exist. Silence would have won again. Zoom out for a moment. What we are really watching isn't a celebrity scandal or a viral moment. It's a case study in how power distorts perspective, how public platforms amplify private dysfunction, and how unresolved resentment can rot relationships from the inside out. Fame doesn't create these problems, but it magnifies them. It puts a spotlight on cracks that already exist and turns them into earthquakes. And caught in the center of it all are 3 children. 3 kids. 2 parents. Millions watching. They didn't ask for fame. They didn't ask for sides to be taken or opinions to be formed. Yet they are the ones who will live longest with the consequences. Long after the internet moves on, long after lawyers close their files, those children will carry memories shaped by this moment. Memories they never consented to create. That's what makes this story so unsettling. The most uncomfortable question isn't who was right or wrong on that recording. It's this: how many warning signs do we need before we stop calling it drama? How many times do we excuse behavior because it comes from someone successful, talented, or admired? How often do we confuse visibility with virtue? As of now, no arrests have been made. Investigations remain quiet. Legal teams are undoubtedly working behind closed doors, crafting statements, managing risk, protecting brands. But accountability doesn't always begin in a courtroom. Sometimes it begins in culture, in conversations, in the collective decision to stop laughing things off, to stop normalizing cruelty as entertainment. January 2026 may ultimately be remembered not for a song release or a game-winning play, but for a moment when the world heard what anger sounds like when it forgets it's being recorded. When a private voice collided with a public conscience. And maybe, just maybe, it becomes a turning point. A reminder that fame does not exempt anyone from responsibility. That power does not cancel empathy. That children deserve protection, not headlines. And that the hardest conversations are often the most necessary ones. If we allow this moment to pass as just another scandal, nothing changes. But if we let it challenge how we view accountability, no matter how famous the voice, then something meaningful might come from the noise. If you want deeper context on the legal and cultural fallout still unfolding, continue with the next video on your screen.